Hey guys, Mike here with a big heart, and today I'm going to tell you all about the day that I survived open heart surgery. So after I was living with my ICD for 8 years, it was time for me to get the battery changed. And that's completely normal. People that have ICDs, batteries last anywhere from 7 to 8 years typically. And when that happens, it's time for you to have a very, very routine surgery to get the battery changed. So this was 8 years after my sudden cardiac arrest. And at the time, I was an assistant basketball coach at Quinnipiac University, Division I school in the MAT conference. So we played teams like Iona, Fairfield, Canisius, Ryder, Monmouth, St. Peter's, the famous most recent one that made a big run in the NCAA tournament. So I was enjoying, a great coaching career. I was 3 years out of college. Things were going really well. And in August, I determined that it was time for me to get the battery replaced. I had gone in for an appointment, and when you go in for your ICD interrogations, they check the battery. So we knew it was time for that to happen, and I wanted to get my surgery done before basketball season. I didn't want it to affect our season, and our kids, they were home after summer workouts, so I had a couple weeks to have the surgery and recover to get ready for the season. So at the end of August, I went up. I was seeing doctors in Boston, and I went up to have the surgery. So it's a really routine surgery. Basically what they do is they actually leave the leads in. They don't remove the leads from your heart muscle unless they're damaged or unless something's wrong with them, but there was nothing wrong with mine. All they do is they detach the battery or the generator from the leads. They reattach a new battery, a new generator. They obviously have to open you up to do that. So when they're done, they close you up and they test the device again to make sure that it works. So I was up in Boston, ready for surgery, really simple procedure, in and out, not even to stay over in the hospital, which I was really excited about. So I went in for the surgery, had my family there, and unfortunately when they went to go test the device again, there was an issue. It would not shock at the correct threshold that they wanted it to shock at. So I woke up from surgery pretty disappointed to hear the news that there was yet another issue with my ICD surgery and that they were going to go in the next day. Because again, if you had watched some of my other videos, this same thing happened a few days after my sudden cardiac arrest when I had my first ICD placed. So they gave us options. They said you can get another wire added, so it'll be a third wire on the side of my chest, which will add more power for the ICD, or we could change your medicine. Back when I was 17, the doctors chose option to change my medicine. But at this point, I had been living on my medicine for 8 years. So I didn't want to change my medicine. I felt very confident in it. I felt like my body had adjusted to it. And I didn't want to do anything that was going to really set me back or have major side effects, whether it be making me tired or other effects. So we determined that it would be best to get that third wire placed. So the next day I went in for surgery, had the third wire placed, and everything was fine. It worked at the right threshold. I came out of surgery. They sent me home later that day, and I went back to work and started getting ready for our season. So a couple weeks went by, and we were getting ready for the season. It was early on in practice, and myself and some of the other staff members, coaches, our academic advisor, our sports information director decided to go out for dinner and some drinks in New Haven, which was right down the road from our campus. So I remember sitting there at the bar where we were eating dinner that night, and I kept itching my chest. It kept bothering me. I couldn't understand why. This has never happened to me before, but I remember I was itching it. I kept kind of messing around with it. It just didn't feel right. So when I got home that night, I changed to go to bed, and I noticed that my chest was really swollen and red and irritated, and this had never happened before. So I woke up the next day and called my doctor and didn't really get the response that I expected from him. He was actually genuinely concerned. He was really worried about this. So he told me I needed to come see him immediately. So I actually just got in my car, drove up to Boston, let him take a look. And when he took a look, he definitely was concerned, but he gave me some medication and said, just go home, take this prescription. all the way through and see what happens. So I did just that. I took a pretty strong antibiotic, and within a couple days, the swelling and the redness and the irritation all went away. I finished the medication and was completely fine. And then our season started, and a couple more weeks went by, and we were preparing for a road trip to University at Albany, upstate New York. And I remember the night before the road trip, I was up all night. My teeth were like chattering because I was so freezing cold, and then I would start just profusely sweating. So I was spiking very, very high temperatures. In my head, I thought I just had the flu. So I stopped by to see my primary care physician the next day to get some medication. And like always, I reached out to my doctors in Boston, my heart doctors, just to kind of let them know what was going on. And again, I was very surprised by the response that I got. My electrophysiologist told me that I needed to come immediately, that he was very sure that the device was infected and that it needed to be removed. And I didn't want to do this because, again, I thought I just had the flu. So I told him basically I was just going to go on the road trip, kind of see what happens. And he said to me, you have a choice. You can either get in the car and come on your own, or I'm going to send an ambulance to your house with the lights on. They're going to put you in the ambulance and get you here. So I elected to get in the car, and I actually was really, really sick. So my mom drove me back up to the hospital. And that particular night, my brother, who was a Division I basketball player at the time at Boston University, had the biggest game of his career. They were playing at Kentucky, who was the number 1 team in the country. And this was the year that they had 10 superstars. So they played 5 guys in, 5 guys out, and they didn't lose a game all season. I believe they lost in the Final Four. So my priority was trying to figure out how to watch this game. I got it on my phone, and then when we got to the hospital, I hopped on the Wi-Fi, and I had a couple miserable nights there because they told me they didn't want to give me any medication because they wanted to see what was causing my fever. And the best way to do that was to take my temperature while I was in one of my extremely cold or extremely hot states. So it was a grueling night in the hospital, and ultimately they made the decision that the device had to come out. And not only the device, because we talked about getting a generator changed, but also the leads, the wires that were touching my heart muscle had to come out as well. And they explained to us that this was a more invasive surgery because the wires were directly touching my heart. They were going to have to use a laser to extract them very carefully. And they explained that one of the risks of a lead extraction that I was going to have was that while they're using the laser to extract the wires, the scar tissue surrounding them could rip, which could cause my heart to bleed. And if this bleeding isn't stopped, you can actually bleed out and die in surgery. So what they do is they prepare you for open heart surgery, because if this bleeding starts, they have to perform emergency open heart surgery to save your life. So they told me there was a 1% to 2% chance of that happening. And I felt pretty optimistic about it, that those were pretty low odds. But I went in for surgery on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so Thanksgiving Eve. At that time in my life, I was 25, so I spent Thanksgiving Eve partying like a lot of young people do, and reconnecting with friends and in my hometown bars. But that year, I definitely was not doing that. So I went in for surgery, and again, my family was in the waiting room. And unfortunately, as they were extracting the leads, the scar tissue ripped, and they had a surgeon on hand that had to perform emergency open heart surgery, saving my life. My family sat there for 12 hours. Of course, I had no concept of time, and they had to just wait. And my mom's instincts kicked in. She knew something was wrong, and they pulled me out of surgery. I was on a ventilator, and I looked in really, really rough shape. So it was a very, very scary time, and I basically remember waking up from the surgery, not really understanding what happened, but I remember feeling like I just basically got run over by a bus. I had led to, my blood pressure was dropping to very dangerous numbers. I had 8 blood transfusions in the surgery. And I actually remember waking up, being slightly awake with the ventilator still in, and then removing it. I had a IV coming out of my neck. So it was a very, very intense surgery, one that I was, again, very, very lucky to survive. And I just want to put a small disclaimer in here, because the purpose of me sharing this information isn't to scare people that have defibrillators, because I truly believe in ICDs. I truly believe that they help improve the quality of life for heart disease patients and patients like myself. The reason I share this is because it is a real thing that happens very rarely. Information that patients and people should know about having an ICD. So again, I had, similar to the day I had survived sudden cardiac arrest, this was a very, very lucky day for my family and me, the day that I survived open heart surgery.